In a world where necromancers are the elite, our protagonist is a poor orphan born in a junkyard. To make matters worse, despite all his efforts, he failed to form a contract with any corpse, making him the subject of ridicule. However, one day, he spotted a corpse that the shop owner was about to discard, as no buyer had been able to form a contract with it. Determined to make this his final attempt, he was shocked when he finally succeeded. What is the story behind this strange corpse, and how powerful is it? Will our protagonist achieve his dream and live the life he has always longed for? That is what we will discover in today's tale. Our story begins with a peculiar-looking individual, his eyes filled with determination. He gestures with his fingers in a specific manner and calls out to another person named Hector, urging him to let the world witness their power. The enormous creature lunges forward with immense force, while another monstrous entity stands against it. This one composed of countless intertwined fingers, each adorned with eyes and sharp fangs. Another individual stands at an equal elevation. It soon becomes clear that this person is controlling the monster through gestures and commands, instructing it to unleash the poisonous tongue and explode with full force. The creature's fingers begin to shift and unfold, revealing a long crimson tongue coiled tightly within. In an instant, the tongue shoots out like a devastating explosion, hurtling at high speed toward the monster under Hector's control. In this world, sorcerers possess the ability to manipulate the corpses of the dead, turning them into warriors that fight on their behalf. These individuals are known as necromancers. The combat performances they orchestrate using these reanimated corpses have become the most famous and widely celebrated sport. Amidst the enthusiastic crowd watching the spectacle, a young boy observes the battle with wide-eyed fascination. He watches the struggle between the necromancers' controlled corpses, unable to believe his eyes, astonished by the incredible feats they achieve. 17 years later in the city of necromancers, these fierce battles between monstrous entities continue. Elsewhere, the boy, now grown, attempts to practice magic, striving to reanimate a corpse through finger gestures and incantations. He calls upon the corpse, addressing it as the Knight, commanding it to rise, defy death, and pledge eternal loyalty to him. A black crystal rests within the corpse's chest. The crystal begins to emit a brilliant red glow, intensifying until it resembles an explosion. The creature stirs, shifts its position, and slowly begins to rise. But suddenly cracks form across the red crystal, and in an instant it shatters. The creature ceases all movement, returning to an inert, lifeless state, leaving our protagonist disheartened as he realizes he has failed once again. He gazes at the lifeless form, certain that the muscle density and skeletal structure are perfectly balanced, and that the reconstruction of the central nervous system was successfully completed. Yet he stands in uncertainty, saddened to find himself back at square one after believing he was close to fulfilling his dream. In another scene, our protagonist is seen scrubbing bathrooms, his frustration evident. His superior calls out his name, Osio, revealing the protagonist's identity, and instructs him to clean a section he had overlooked. Osio replies that he will, though his boss notices that he seems distracted. As he walks away, Osio catches sight of advertisements for an upcoming corpse battle tournament, noting the massive number of participants and the exceptionally large prize money this time. Elsewhere, a group of students gathers as their instructor teaches them the fundamentals of necromancy, explaining that controlling corpses requires precise finger movements and powerful vocal commands. Outside the classroom, Osio, while mopping the floor, listens intently to the lesson, absorbing every word the instructor and students recite. At that moment, his supervisor appears, calling him angrily for being late with deliveries. But Osio remains engrossed in the lecture, unfazed by his tardiness. Later, he is seen sprinting through the streets with delivery parcels in hand, while reading his notebook about the harpy's talons, noted for their steel-like hardness, as they are not composed of keratin, but of a mineral-based protein compound. He continues reading, discovering that he must connect the nerves to the muscles, with the first step being to attach the talon's base to the upper arm muscles. While engrossed in reading the instructions, he is suddenly startled by a voice calling out to him. As he turns to see who it is, he is struck hard across the face. At that moment, it becomes clear that the one who hit him is a combat corpse, accompanied by the girl who owns it. She immediately begins scolding him, reminding him that she had previously asked him, politely, to leave the city for good. She is not alone. Another sorcerer stands by her side. He turns to her and asks if this is the scum of a man she had mentioned before. She confirms that he is indeed the one. She then continues, stating that Osio was born in a garbage dump and grew up among the filth from which he came. At this, Osio glares at her with intense anger, not only because of the blow from her fighter and the humiliation in her words, but also because of her decision to expel him from the entire city. Yet, he remains silent and does not respond. However, the man accompanying her questions how a person could survive on trash. She replies that Osio's father had also lived off garbage. She goes on to say that Osio must have inherited that trait from his father, who was not a normal human by any means, just a worthless piece of trash. She then adds that merely looking at him disgusts her, and that she cannot comprehend why he is still in the city. At this moment, Osio's anger reaches its peak. He shouts at her, declaring that he is not trash and that it does not matter where he was born or how he was raised. Clenching the paper he holds tightly in his fist, he asserts that the only person who has the right to determine his fate is himself, no one else. The girl smirks mockingly and asks if he truly believes that becoming a necromancer will change how people see him and make them accept him. Suddenly, Osio is struck again, knocking him to the ground. Her massive corpse restrains him as she continues speaking, stating that he does not even have a knight of his own. Yet, he speaks of matters far beyond his capability, despite spending 10 years trying and still failing to animate a single corpse. The creature presses harder against his head as the girl tells him to leave the city, claiming that his mere presence makes it reek. She then fixes her gaze on him and warns that if she ever sees his face in the city again, she will not be as lenient as she was now. She will turn him into actual trash. At that moment, it becomes clear that the first person to ever utter the words Osio just spoke about one's birth and upbringing not determining their fate was the renowned sorcerer, Raphael. Raphael had grown up poor and orphaned, and when he entered the corpse wars, he did so alone. Yet, he managed to set records and secure 6 consecutive victories. His achievements made him the most famous human participant in the corpse wars worldwide. As for Osio, his greatest dream was to become like Raphael, to be the best in his field, if only for once in his life. He longed for fame, and to witness people clapping for him in admiration and awe of his abilities. Lost in his thoughts and dreams, he suddenly hears his father's voice echoing in his mind, questioning whether he truly believes he can achieve his ambitions, reminding him that he is nothing more than worthless trash. The day passes, and the scene shifts to the following day. Osio finds himself in a shop selling materials for necromancers. He begins inspecting the tools he needs, but notices that the quality of the merchandise that day is poor. Nothing seems useful. However, something catches his eye: a corpse lying alone in one of the shop's rooms. It is a female corpse, but it is missing its left arm and right leg. When he asks the shopkeeper about it, the man replies that it is merely a leftover piece, soon to be discarded. Osio then questions whether even a human corpse is something they would throw away. The shopkeeper explains that it is somewhat special. It had been put up for sale a year ago and had already been purchased 13 times. Yet every time, the sorcerer who acquired it failed to animate it, leading to its return to the shop. Osio explains that corpses that sustain damage eventually become as hard as stone before shattering. He then wonders why this corpse has remained intact. The shopkeeper responds that this corpse has never been animated before, clarifying that while rare, such cases are not impossible. He adds that every few years, corpses with such defects appear. The shopkeeper then steps closer to Osio and asks if he is interested in purchasing it, explaining that they were going to dispose of it anyway. Thus, he is willing to sell it to him at an extremely low price, on one condition, that he never brings it back. Osio considers his words but soon notices that the corpse's hand looks rather unusual. He asks the shopkeeper about it, and the man replies that it is quite special. However, he cannot disclose all the details, as the laws prohibit him from doing so. Nevertheless, he mentions having heard that this corpse once belonged to a well-known mercenary fighter. He continues, saying there are rumors that she could destroy anything with a single strike. But in the end, the corpses of warriors are nothing more than tools. They possess no thoughts or awareness. So whatever their identity was before death, it no longer matters. Osio hesitates for a moment before telling him that he does not need such a corpse, as it has failed to be animated 13 times already. That means taking it would be a gamble. The shopkeeper responds that he completely understands and even agrees, remarking that trash will always remain worthless trash. Upon hearing these words, Osio freezes in place, lost in thought, recalling all the insults he had endured. Yet, he does not make a decision immediately. The scene then shifts to show Osio pulling a wooden cart behind him, admitting to himself that he bought the corpse. He spent every last coin he had, leaving himself with nothing, not even enough to buy food for the next day, let alone pay next week's rent. When he arrives home, he opens the crate containing the corpse, reflecting on how he had thought his attempts were over and that he had no more chances left. Yet, he begins repairing its damaged parts, using pieces from other corpses to replace the missing limbs. As he works, he realizes that, for some reason he cannot explain, he wants to give this corpse another chance. And so, he completes its body once again. Looking at it, he recalls how the shopkeeper called it trash. However, he decides that none of that matters. He assures himself that they will succeed together and form an unrivaled team. At that moment, he begins casting his magic, moving his fingers as he chants the words to bring the corpse to life. He is convinced that they will become the most famous duo in the world, with crowds cheering for them. Suddenly, a bright light fills the room, and the corpse begins to move before sitting upright in front of Osio. In that instant, he can hardly believe it. He has finally succeeded in reviving a corpse that had resisted animation 13 times before. However, what shocks and terrifies him even more is that the corpse looks at him as if it is thinking, then expresses confusion about its existence and his, before asking, "Who are you?" At that moment, Osio screams in terror, prompting the corpse to scream as well upon seeing his reaction. Both continue screaming, neither making an effort to understand what is happening. Their screams persist, and in his panic, Osio grabs a large knife and points it at the corpse, demanding to know how a corpse could possibly speak. But the moment the corpse's eyes land on the knife in Osio's hand, it senses danger. This causes the red light within the crystal embedded in its body to glow intensely, spreading throughout its entire form. Osio tries speaking to it again, but suddenly he is struck by a powerful blow that sends him flying out of the room. The scene transitions into Osio's thoughts, where his father appears once more, mocking him and questioning whether he truly believes he could ever become a necromancer. He then jeers at him, saying that he should stop chasing illusions, adding that his mother was trash as well and was the reason his life was ruined. He goes on to declare that the son of trash will always remain trash. No matter how hard he tries, he will never amount to anything of value, nor will he ever become famous or well-known. Simply put, he will always be nothing more than garbage. At that moment, Osio wakes up screaming, terrified by the nightmare that had just plagued him. After a few moments of stillness, he gathers his thoughts, telling himself that it was just a dream, the same nightmare he always has, and that surely none of it was real. After all, a corpse could not possibly speak. But suddenly, as he lifts his gaze, he sees the corpse sitting right in front of him on the same table, speaking to him once again. It tells him that he should consider himself lucky to still be alive. She then explains that her right leg is not functioning properly, which is why her strike was not precise enough to finish him off completely. At that moment, Osio is struck with shock once more, realizing that this is no dream, it is reality. He lets out another loud scream before collapsing to the ground. The corpse, however, scolds him, demanding that he lower his voice, as his noise is irritating her. His astonishment grows when he realizes that his hands and feet are bound to the chair he is sitting on. He asks the corpse what she has done to him and what she intends to do next. She stares at him before saying that he is the one who should be answering questions, as she wants to know what he has done to her body. After a brief silence, she narrows her eyes at him and then raises her hand threateningly, warning that if he does not answer her questions, she will not miss her next strike. Osio glances at the wall that was shattered by her attack, observing the destruction she caused. He quickly decides it is best to explain everything to her, and so he tells her the full story, leading her to realize that he is a necromancer. She then comments that at least he is not some lunatic or deviant. This surprises him, prompting him to ask why she would assume that. She gestures toward their surroundings but suddenly pauses, fully grasping what that implies, that she had indeed been dead. She then continues, saying that, in any case, she appreciates being brought back to life, but she would rather they never meet again. With that, she turns to leave. However, Osio calls out to her, demanding that she stop. He tells her that she will not be able to move properly because the left arm and right leg he attached to her are not originally hers. He then adds that he is the only one who can make them function, as he is the necromancer who revived her. She questions what he means by that, and Osio explains that no matter how powerful she may be, in her current state, she definitely needs his help. However, upon hearing his words, she bursts into laughter, scoffing at the mere idea. Then, without hesitation, she grabs a knife and begins cutting off the leg he had attached. She keeps going until she severs it completely. Standing on just one foot, she holds the knife in her hand and boldly declares herself to be Eleonora, the strongest and most beautiful warrior in the world. She then asserts that whether she has two legs or not, she will never need his help, or anyone else's. With that, she turns to leave, while Osio stands there, bewildered, desperately searching for a way to make her stay. In that instant, an idea strikes him, and he immediately calls out to Eleonora, telling her that he wants to hire her. This causes her to pause and listen to his proposal. He reminds her that she was a mercenary, meaning she fought for money, and that even after death, her body was sold. This means she must be in dire need of money, so he offers her a job to fight alongside him. Eleonora looks at him with curiosity, commenting that he is quite an interesting person and that he is right. So long as the pay is good, she will do whatever is required without asking questions, and she will never refuse a fight. She then reveals that she is burdened with an enormous debt, far greater than he could possibly imagine, and that she must repay it, which is why she so desperately needs money. At that, Osio smirks and tells her that he will pay her 80 billion gold coins. He then asks if that amount is enough to clear her debts. Eleonora responds that it might be, but she then asks whether he actually has that much money. Instead of answering, he poses another question, asking if she knows the prize money for this year's corpse war. He then pulls out the competition's announcement and shows it to her. She reads it and sees that the cash prize is 100 billion gold coins. Stunned, she asks if that number is real. Osio confidently confirms that it is, explaining that corpse war has become the most famous sport in the entire world. Eleonora pauses for a moment, recalling that she had never possessed any talent for necromancy. Because of that, she had never paid attention to things that held no benefit for her. Osio asks if she has decided to join him, pointing out that since she is a combat corpse, it will be easier for them to enter the competition, as long as they manage to hide the fact that she is conscious and capable of thought and feeling. He then adds that if she truly claims to be the strongest and greatest warrior, then together they should have no difficulty achieving victory. With growing enthusiasm, he continues, assuring her that their names will become famous and that crowds will cheer for them everywhere they go. However, Eleonora tells him that she does not care about fame and asks if he will indeed pay her 80% of the prize money, as he promised. Osio confirms that this is true, considering it a very generous share, but Eleonora insists on taking 95%. Osio immediately refuses, explaining that he has incurred expenses, including the cost of the materials he used, along with other expensive necessities. He proposes giving her 85%, but she remains firm on 95%. He tries to negotiate, suggesting 92%, but she rejects it again, insisting on 95% once more. In the end, Osio explodes in frustration and agrees to give her the percentage she demands. Eleonora smiles and tells him he should not be upset about losing to her. After all, she is an expert in negotiation and bargaining. She then requests that they put the agreement in writing, stating that she does not trust verbal promises without official documentation. With that, the deal is finalized, leaving both of them seemingly satisfied. The scene shifts to a later moment, where Osio reattaches the leg Eleonora had cut off. He then asks if she can walk properly now. Since he is the one controlling her movement, Eleonora, now wearing an eerie mask, tells him that he is moving too fast and needs to slow down. Osio responds by explaining that controlling a corpse is not easy for him, especially since this is the first time he has ever succeeded in doing so. Eleonora then asks about the strange mask he made her wear and why she has to keep it on. He explains that this is one of the fundamental rules for necromancers when using human corpses. The face must be covered to prevent recognition. He also stresses, just as he has told her multiple times, that no one must know she is conscious. It will be better and easier for her that way. But Eleonora does not like this rule and protests, claiming that her face is unique and valuable. Osio quickly warns her to stop talking while they are walking in public, reminding her that combat knights do not speak. They only move. Suddenly, the same girl who had tormented him earlier appears again, accompanied by her companion and a group of knights. She calls out to him, reminding him that she had warned him before. If she saw him again, she would eliminate him. Osio feels irritated by her presence. Eleonora asks who she is and why she is acting so hostile toward him, but he tells her not to interfere, assuring her that he will handle it himself. However, the girl notices Eleonora and mockingly asks Osio if this is the knight he finally managed to revive after 10 years of failure. She then sneers, saying that the knight he brought back looks pathetic, just like him, and is hideous beyond belief. This enrages Eleonora, while the bully laughs, adding that after seeing this thing Osio owns, she is now even more eager to witness his humiliation and defeat in the competition. For now, she will let him be. But suddenly, a mocking voice responds to her, pointing out how confidently she speaks, despite looking as frail as skin and bones. The girl stops laughing and turns to Osio, demanding to know what he just said. At that moment, Osio whispers to Eleonora, reminding her that he had asked her to remain silent. She retorts, irritated, saying that his request is getting on her nerves. The bully then asks Osio directly if he was the one who made that comment. After a brief hesitation, he admits that he did. He then asks if she has a problem with that before calling her skin and bones, repeating Eleonora's words. The girl's anger flares, and she lunges at him with her knight, screaming that she will kill him on the spot. Osio and Eleonora prepare for battle. Eleonora instructs him to control her right leg properly. At the very moment the bully's knight launches an attack on them, Eleonora counters with an incredibly powerful strike using her original arm, shocking everyone present. We learn that the bully's name is Kalina, and that since childhood, she had possessed an exceptional talent for magic, surpassing everyone else. She was able to achieve average results with minimal effort, which led her to view other sorcerers as incompetent. She often mocked others, claiming that she could perform magic that they could not even attempt, and with far less effort. With her continuous victories, she grew to despise those beneath her level, treating them with arrogance and condescension. This was the only thing that brought her joy. Naturally, someone like Osio, who had always put in the effort despite growing up among garbage, yet remained inferior to her in every way despite his struggles, was the perfect target for her bullying. But at this moment, Osio realizes that he had been nothing more than an easy prey for her. Now he sees Kalina standing in shock at what had just happened. We discover the reason for her astonishment when we see that Eleonora, with a single strike of her hand, has completely destroyed Kalina's ferocious knight. Her companion is equally stunned, wondering how it was possible to annihilate it in just one blow. He observes that there is nothing left intact of the knight and exclaims that this is impossible. Kalina screams that it cannot be. There's no way she could lose, and even worse, lose to someone like Osio, that lowly. But before she can finish, Osio interrupts her, asking if she has a problem. She glares at him in fury, then shifts her hateful gaze to Eleonora, but finds herself at a loss for words. Enraged, she storms off, while Osio feels overwhelming joy at finally defeating Kalina and utterly crushing her knight. Afterward, Osio and Eleonora return home, where Osio exclaims that they were lucky this time, but it was an incredibly dangerous situation. He explains to her that fighting outside the competition is strictly forbidden, and she could have been exposed and recognized. Eleonora gives him a questioning look, asking if he now believes he is in a position to issue commands and dictate what she should or should not do. Osio glares at her in frustration, but does not answer immediately. Instead, he clarifies that he is not giving orders. He is making a request. He acknowledges that she is undoubtedly the best in combat, but he is the one most familiar with the corpse wars and has extensive experience with them. He then brings up her previous mention of the enormous debt she is trying to repay, emphasizing that in order to do so, they must avoid taking such reckless risks. Eleonora considers his words and agrees, promising that she will try to follow his advice. She then asks what their next step is. Osio tells her that they need to register as contestants in the competition. He explains that the officials will test her on a few basic skills. Then, looking at her anxiously, he wonders aloud whether she will be able to pass those tests. The scene transitions to a new setting, where Osio leads Eleonora to the committee responsible for the competition. However, her movements appear strange and sluggish. The committee members take notice, visibly puzzled, until one of them asks whether she is at least capable of running. Osio attempts to assist her by controlling her right leg, but it does not move properly, making her gait look utterly ridiculous. The committee members watch her awkward movements in stunned silence, unable to come up with a suitable comment. After a full minute of complete stillness, the committee chairman finally declares that her movements are indeed unnatural. However, he acknowledges that she is capable of performing the basic requirements and that they need more contestants for the weaker divisions. Based on this, he approves their application, officially making Osio a participant in the corpse wars. In the next scene, Osio stands before a mirror, dressed in his competition uniform, feeling a surge of happiness. When Eleonora sees him, she notes his obvious excitement and sarcastically remarks that his expression makes his enthusiasm painfully clear. He responds that of course he is thrilled. He has been waiting for this moment for 17 years. Eleonora, still amused, mockingly states that she is so deeply moved that she is on the verge of tears. She then points at her leg, asking when he plans to properly adjust its movement. She warns him that if he forces her to walk in this ridiculous manner any longer, she might have to cut off the leg he controls and simply walk on one leg again. Osio quickly rejects that idea, pointing out that while she may be able to defeat humans with just one leg, the knights are monsters, far superior to humans in strength. There is no way she could defeat them on one leg alone. Eleonora yells at him, demanding that he hurry up and adjust her movement properly, insisting that he is not controlling her correctly at all. Osio shouts back just as loudly, explaining that this is her body, not his. How is he supposed to balance the part he attached with her original body? He then asks if she has even tried to coordinate her movement with his. Eleonora yells at him again, questioning why she should be the one to adapt to his control. After all, she is Eleonora, the one who… But before she can finish, the loudspeakers interrupt, announcing that the opening ceremony of the competition is about to begin and that all contestants must head to the battlefield immediately. At that moment, Osio tells her that they will continue this discussion later. He then instructs her to put on the mask immediately, emphasizing the importance of keeping her face hidden to avoid recognition for security reasons. Although clearly annoyed, Eleonora puts on the mask, and the two of them proceed together to the arena, where the rest of the contestants are gathered. There, Eleonora takes notice of the combat corpses surrounding her, finding them extremely bizarre, each one more grotesque than the last. Meanwhile, Osio focuses on finding their assigned spot, knowing that their number is 7,508. Once he locates it, he takes his position alongside Eleonora. However, Eleonora remains preoccupied with the monstrous figure standing behind them. She nudges Osio, informing him that there is a particularly strange individual right behind them, with things coming out of his mouth. Osio, however, warns her not to make a fuss, and to keep her eyes fixed forward. He cautions her that if she causes any trouble here, she will find herself in serious danger, and the consequences will not be favorable for her. As they stand there, the opening ceremony begins. A voice echoes across the arena, declaring that names are eternal, even though the human body is weak and fleeting. We then see the speaker as he continues his speech, stating that some names remain in people's memories for decades. He adds that there are names remembered for hundreds of years, and others immortalized for thousands, for they are the ones who achieve true eternity. He goes on to express his hope that, in this war, a player will emerge whose name will be remembered forever. Then, he extends his hand toward the contestants, addressing the 8,304 players before him. He asks if all the great necromancers prepared for this brutal battle are truly ready for combat. In unison, the sorcerers all respond that they are. He then passionately asks if they are willing to dedicate their hearts and souls to securing a victory that will etch their names into history for thousands of years. Once again, the players, including Osio, respond in unison, affirming their full readiness. At that moment, the speaker smiles before officially declaring the start of the 145th Corpse War. The players erupt into cheers, celebrating the competition's launch. However, he soon raises his hand, halting the celebrations to announce that he will now explain the details of the first preliminary round. He states that this round is of utmost importance, as it serves to introduce new players to the audience. He adds that this round will result in the elimination of 20% of the players based on their performance. Its structure is based on random matchups. He clarifies that the first sorcerer to secure 2 victories will advance, while the first to suffer 4 losses will be eliminated. Some sorcerers appear confident in their ability to secure 2 wins and move forward, while the weaker ones hope to last through 5 matches without being disqualified. After that, the speaker begins selecting players for the matchups. He then points toward Osio, announcing that the player standing on the black line will be facing the player directly behind him. Slowly, Osio turns around to see who is standing behind him, only to find someone laughing with overwhelming enthusiasm, his face beaming with excitement. The man seems utterly delighted, exclaiming that his luck is incredible. His first opponent in the competition turns out to be a small, adorable one. He then looks at Osio confidently, declaring that he will allow him to witness the absolute beauty he has managed to create. Osio stands firm, listening to his words while staring at him with a challenging gaze, yet he does not respond. The player tells Osio that he recognizes that look all too well. He has seen it many times before. He knows that Osio finds him ugly and repulsive. He continues, explaining that everyone he has ever met has viewed him the same way. However, once they see the masterpiece he has created, they always admit that it is. But before he can finish, Osio interrupts him, stating that he had actually been looking at that masterpiece of his all along, and that it truly is an impressive piece of work. He then adds that despite the large size of the head, the muscles and bones around the neck are strong enough to keep it upright. He also observed that the muscle fibers around the mouth have grown thicker and more powerful. After this praise, he extends his hand to his opponent and tells him that while he intends to win, he still wishes him a good match. The opposing player is taken aback by this gesture, as he has never been treated this way before. After shaking Osio's hand, he remarks that this is the first time anyone has ever shaken his hand without caring about his appearance. Later, the player appears with his knight, beaming with joy as he talks about Osio. He points out that Osio does not care about his ugliness, and that he is, in fact, a genuinely kind person. He then looks at Osio and assures him that they have succeeded, and that he will undoubtedly show him the perfect beauty he has created. The scene shifts to the first preliminary matches of the competition, marking the beginning of the Corpse War, with 3 qualifying rounds. Once the 3 rounds conclude, a total of 1,000 players will be selected from all the participants to advance to the next stage. Osio explains to Eleonora that the rules of these rounds are constantly changing, making it difficult to prepare for them. However, in the end, the process is quite simple. Winning 2 matches is enough to qualify, while losing 4 will result in elimination. He then pulls out a small device and tells her that it will be of great help to them. She does not understand what it is, so he clarifies that it is a magical communication device. Osio adds that he has modified its design so that she can wear it on her ear, allowing them to communicate over a distance of up to 300 meters. He further explains that the device allows them to hear each other clearly, regardless of how loud or soft their voices are. Moreover, only the person wearing it can hear the other's voice. Eleonora takes the device, places it on her ear, then calls him an idiot and asks if he can hear her now. He replies that he can, and asks her to stop acting weird, reminding her that he had to sell half of his home furniture and personal belongings to afford the device, so she should not waste it. Eleonora comments that these competitions are indeed fun, just as he had told her before. She then asks if he is not going to test the device first. Osio explains that while the competition is based on the sorcerer's skills, certain accessories are permitted within specific limits. He then elaborates that the arena where the competition takes place is surrounded by a powerful magical field, preventing communication devices from functioning, except between users within the arena itself. He adds that this means they cannot communicate with anyone outside the battlefield using this device. Eleonora acknowledges his explanation, and Osio asks if she is ready, as their first match is about to begin. Osio and Eleonora arrive at the battlefield, where an official awaits them. The official instructs Osio to step onto the elevated platform to start the match. Osio ascends, standing at a great height, while Eleonora remains in the arena, preparing to face the knight belonging to his opponent, who goes by the name Wing. At that moment, Osio notices the absence of spectators in the arena. However, he is not surprised, as he expected this. After all, it is only a preliminary round, and no one is interested in watching unknown players. The official then announces the completion of the player's readiness check and officially declares the start of the first match. Standing still, Osio closes his eyes, attempting to calm himself and focus. He reminds himself that the presence of an audience is not important right now. What truly matters is concentrating and winning the match. The official then instructs the players to prepare, as the battle is about to begin. At that moment, Osio calls out to Eleonora enthusiastically, urging her to show the world their strength. Without hesitation, Eleonora dashes into the arena at high speed, heading toward the opposing knight, while both Osio and the rival player closely observe her. Suddenly, she stumbles and falls hard, immediately contacting Osio through the communication device, reproaching him for not slowing her foot movements as they had agreed. He responds, explaining that he had indeed moved slowly, but it was her excessive speed that caused the fall. Frustrated, Eleonora gets up, visibly upset, and tells Osio that she is annoyed by what is happening. She then declares that she will move in her own way, asking him to simply keep up with her. She then surges forward again at high speed toward the opposing knight. However, just as she gets close and prepares to attack, she is caught off guard by his ability to leap high into the air with a frog-like agility. At that moment, Osio reminds her that the objective of the battle is to destroy the knight's core, explaining that the core is represented by the red crystal inside his body. He also emphasizes the importance of protecting her own core, especially since their chances of winning depend on close-range attacks, while their defensive options are extremely limited. He then begins guiding her to move cautiously and analyze the enemy's movements. However, she abruptly interrupts him, arguing that doing so would be a waste of time, giving the enemy an opportunity to strategize against them. She adds that this is especially problematic since they have yet to reach an adequate running speed. Deciding not to waste time on analysis, she immediately charges forward, announcing her intention to block the enemy's path. She leaps high into the air in an attempt to strike, but the frog-like knight skillfully evades the attack, once again outmaneuvering her. In that instant, Osio realizes that he and Eleonora are struggling to synchronize their movements. He also notices that her motion is slow due to her reliance on a single foot, making their actions predictable and easy for the enemy to read. He then observes that the frog is distancing itself rather than attacking, prompting him to wonder about its true strategy. His attention suddenly shifts to the creature's back, where he notices something unusual. Meanwhile, Wing addresses Osio, questioning whether these are all the skills he has to offer. He then cryptically remarks that strength is sometimes found in unexpected places. Continuing, he explains that he has been carefully studying their movements, but now believes that it was not worth the effort. As a result, he declares that the battle will end immediately, promising to reveal his masterpiece to Osio. Suddenly, the dark circles on the frog's back begin transforming into human-like faces, and the player announces that they are about to witness perfect beauty. Seeing these faces, Eleonora turns to Osio and questions his earlier statement about the need to conceal faces to avoid recognition. He replies that these are not ordinary human faces. Wing resumes speaking, revealing that he has spent his entire life searching for ideal proportions and perfection in order to achieve these faces. He adds that he sees no reason to hide them, as they do not belong to real individuals, but rather represent the embodiment of perfect beauty, one that is about to detonate and cannot be stopped. As Osio processes these words and focuses on the frog's body, he suddenly realizes the truth and urgently warns Eleonora that these things are about to explode. Indeed, the faces begin rushing toward Eleonora at an incredible speed, while she remains frozen in place, still not fully grasping what is happening. The moment one of these faces touches her, a massive explosion erupts. When the blast subsides, it becomes clear that Eleonora has lost her left arm due to the explosion. Osio immediately contacts her through the communication device, asking if she is all right. She responds by asking whether he was the one who stopped the explosives from completely hitting her. He explains that he sacrificed his left arm, using his own body to shield her from the blast. He then warns her that any further direct hits could be extremely dangerous and urges her to be cautious. Eleonora informs Osio that the faces are moving, then transforming into living creatures, and asks if the player is directing them to chase her. However, Osio clarifies that once these faces detach from the knight's body, they are no longer under any control. He adds that they remain alive for only a very short time, meaning their movement is strictly linear, without targeting any specific objective. He then explains that these explosives appear to have been created by combining the enzymatic degradation products of toxic amphibians, noting that this type of compound only detonates upon violent impact with something. Eleonora quickly deduces the situation, but before she can finish her thought, one of these explosive faces approaches her. She swiftly evades it. As expected, the explosion occurs immediately upon its collision with another object. Eleonora then concludes that she must completely avoid these airborne entities. As a result, she feels a surge of excitement, as if she has returned to the battles she fought before her death. She then declares that, for the first time since the fight began, she feels her blood boiling. At that moment, she spots another explosive face approaching and decides that the battle is now different. It will be a fight worthy of her. Just before the explosive face reaches her, she moves swiftly out of its path, causing the explosives to collide with one another. Yet, she successfully dodges them each time. Wing laughs mockingly and then questions Osio, asking how long he plans to keep running, especially since his knight isn't even capable of running properly in the first place. After that, Wing maneuvers his frog, making it leap high into the air before launching a barrage of explosives toward Eleonora. Eleonora dashes forward at high speed, skillfully avoiding most of the incoming explosives despite their sheer number. However, suddenly, she finds one of the explosive faces dangerously close to her, about to strike her directly. Osio attempts to synchronize her right foot's movement with her left, but he fails, resulting in an explosion occurring alarmingly close to Eleonora's body. She crashes to the ground following the explosion, which nearly costs her life. Osio tells her that this is the limit they cannot exceed without achieving precise movement. Otherwise, they will never win. He then continues, explaining that he has spent the past moments analyzing the reasons behind her failed footwork and has discovered that the main cause is a lack of trust. He elaborates that since her right foot is not originally part of her body, her strength unconsciously concentrates on her right side, leading to an imbalance with every step she takes. He asserts that for her to move correctly, she must trust him and stop constantly thinking about her right foot. He begins to say that she should, but before he can finish, Eleonora interrupts him with a direct question. How is she supposed to trust him? She then sharply adds that he is not the one actually fighting, yet he expects her to trust him while he remains at a safe distance, merely moving his fingers. Rising to her feet once more, she confronts him, stating that he needs to understand she cannot trust anyone who is not willing to risk their life alongside her. At that moment, Osio falls silent, unable to respond, as he watches her continue to evade all incoming attacks. Eleonora keeps running, dodging each explosive, but eventually she falls to the ground again. At that moment, Osio speaks, declaring that this is his last chance as well. He begins telling his story, revealing that he was born in a garbage dump, a place despised by all, and that his father always looked down on him, treating him in the worst way possible. He explains that he spent his entire life as an outcast, ignored by people who treated him as nothing more than worthless trash, and that no matter how much he spoke, no one ever understood his feelings. At that moment, Osio recalls the shadow of his father, who always looked at him as a failure. Continuing his story, he states that if he fails to prove himself now, to that man who despised him all his life and to the entire world, he will never be able to escape the garbage dump he was born into. He adds that if he does not become the best, and if everyone does not acknowledge it, he will never be able to prove to his father that he was wrong. He then asserts that meeting Eleonora was his last chance to understand the meaning of life, emphasizing that he is not asking her to trust him, but rather to trust in his determination and unwavering resolve to win. Eleonora stands in silence, contemplating his words, but she does not respond. Suddenly, a new wave of explosive faces begins its attack. Eleonora swiftly dashes away from the blast zone, and for the first time she confidently steps forward on her right foot. She then continues running at full speed without any hesitation about the right foot that Osio had crafted for her. Watching her with overwhelming joy, Osio cheers her on, telling her that she has finally succeeded in running, before asking her to trust in, but she interrupts him, clarifying that he should not misunderstand her words. She firmly states that his past or the sincerity of his story does not matter to her in the slightest. Osio fails to grasp what she means, so Eleonora elaborates, explaining that she is now placing her bet on her own judgment of him based on his past actions, since he has already saved her life twice. She tries to move forward steadily, but her steps are still not perfectly balanced. She admits that she has not yet reached the desired level, but Osio interrupts her, pointing out that the reasons are irrelevant, and now that she has managed to leap high while running, avoiding the explosives will become much easier. He then adds that less than half of the explosives remain, and once they are dealt with, the knight will be nothing more than a giant frog, giving them the chance to get close. Indeed, the explosives continue to hurl toward Eleonora one after another, but she effortlessly dodges each of them without allowing any to detonate near her. Osio begins counting the remaining explosives on the frog's body, while Wing appears visibly frustrated upon hearing that only 6 remain. Osio keeps counting down until only 1 remains, and when it finally explodes, he declares to Eleonora that they have finally finished. At that moment, Eleonora tells him that this is their chance to get close to the frog, so she surges toward it, preparing for a direct attack. However, just as she approaches, the frog leaps astonishingly high, quickly distancing itself, preventing her from landing a hit. Pressing her right foot down with confidence, Eleonora readies herself to leap and strike the frog, determined that this time will be different from all previous attempts. But she is suddenly shocked to see new explosives appearing in place of the ones that had just been eliminated. She freezes in disbelief at what is happening. Wing laughs and tells Osio that he underestimated him, explaining that he had 10 reserve explosives hidden inside his knight for such situations. He then launches all 10 explosives at once toward Eleonora, who stands her ground against the attack. With a determined spirit, she tells Osio that this is her battle, and she will emerge victorious. Osio begins directing her, advising her not to focus on the explosives descending from above, but instead to strike the ground beneath her. Eleonora immediately understands his intent. Instead of trying to evade the approaching explosives, she slams her fist into the ground with immense force. This triggers a massive explosion that devastates everything around her, leaving Wing speechless as he watches in disbelief. He questions the cause of such a large explosion, insisting that it was not the result of his own explosives. When the dust settles, Eleonora emerges from the wreckage and tells Osio that his decision was absolutely correct. He responds by remarking that her punch carried an incredible destructive force, shattering the ground around her. He then adds that it felt as if he had detonated a bomb, rather than merely witnessing her land a punch. However, he admits that he was taking a gamble, uncertain of the outcome or the full effect of the technique she used. Eleonora replies, beginning to explain the technique she had just utilized. But suddenly Osio recalls that he had previously asked her if she could use this technique only once. At that time, she had explained that the technique works by concentrating all her energy and strength into her fist. After executing the attack, her hand turns completely black, just as it is now. Sure enough, her hand appears charred like coal. She then moves her fingers, explaining that her hand will gradually return to normal, but it will take approximately 4 hours to gather enough energy for another strike of the same magnitude. Osio tells her that this means she cannot use the technique more than once in any battle. He then pauses for a moment before asking her about the possible consequences if she were to use her fist in its current state. Eleonora replies that she had used it twice in succession before meeting him, then asks him about her current physical condition. He responds by reminding her that she is already missing a limb. He also points out that when he first saw her, there was a severe wound near her heart. She confirms that using the technique twice in a row makes her body incapable of withstanding its after effects. As she recalls the shattered red crystal, a look of concern and fear appears on her face. She then states that this means her heart will explode and that she will die. Osio snaps back to the present, reiterating that this technique can only be used once. However, he still struggles to determine the best way to utilize it. He looks at Eleonora standing before the frog, then remarks that the same rule applies to the Frog Knight. Eleonora responds confidently, saying that this is the perfect time for a real battle between warriors using only their fists. At that moment, the massive frog watches Eleonora as she approaches, preparing to attack her, convinced that she will be its next meal. But in a fraction of a second, Eleonora moves at an astonishing speed, landing a direct punch to its heart, shattering the red crystal within its body. Immediately, the official overseeing the match announces that the frog is no longer able to fight due to the critical injury to its core, declaring Osio's team the victors. When Osio hears the result and realizes that he has won the battle, he can hardly believe it. He lets out a triumphant shout, declaring himself the winner. Afterward, the players leave the arena, and in the private chamber shared by Osio and Eleonora, Osio excitedly praises her, expressing his joy and admiration for her performance, especially during the final part of the battle. He also tells her that her name truly suits her, and that she deserves the title of the greatest warrior. Eleonora remains silent for a moment before replying that he was actually better than she had expected. Osio responds by saying that they must maintain this energy and level of performance for the next battle. But at that moment, a voice from outside the room remarks that everything was perfect this time. When he turns to the source of the voice, he finds Wing standing next to the body of his knight, declaring that he has finally achieved perfect beauty. Osio feels a sense of sympathy for Wing and sincerely tells him that his knight was incredibly strong. Wing is taken aback by Osio's words and asks if he truly means it. Osio affirms that his knight was indeed very powerful. He then adds that the knight Wing created, along with the abilities he integrated into it, clearly reflected the immense effort and passion he put into his work. However, he points out that it was perhaps too perfect. Wing is overjoyed and tells Osio that this is the first time someone has praised his work in such a way, thanking him for his understanding. However, Osio explains that the only issue he noticed was that Wing cares too much about others' opinions. He then tells him that beauty is subjective, and that it would be better if he started showcasing beauty as he perceives it, rather than how others expect it to be. Wing is surprised by these words, yet at the same time, he feels a deep sense of happiness. He then asks Osio if he truly believes in this idea. After a brief pause, a wide smile appears on his face, and he admits that this is an incredible concept, one he had never considered before. Thanks to Osio's words, Wing feels overwhelming joy. He then tells Osio that he will always follow his journey, watching as he continues to grow into one of the greatest sorcerers. He also assures him that he will be one of his biggest supporters. He adds that he is certain Osio will achieve his goal. Deeply moved by Wing's words and excitement, Osio senses his sincerity. Wing, filled with excitement after his conversation with Osio, declares that he too will surprise the world with the new knight he is going to create, one that will be more beautiful and powerful than any he has ever built before. The scene shifts to a different location, where Osio and Eleonora return to Osio's home. Suddenly, Eleonora's voice is heard, shouting the name Eli. Moments later, Osio appears, trying to convince her to start calling herself by this name. He argues that Eleonora is too long and difficult to pronounce during battle, and a shorter, quicker name would be more effective. However, Eleonora becomes furious, warning him seriously not to joke about such matters. She asserts that if he believes they have become friends, he is mistaken, emphasizing that no one has ever dared to call her by that name before. Osio attempts to calm her down, urging her to think about it rationally. He explains that in certain situations, a single second can make the difference between victory and defeat. He then demonstrates the difference by saying Eleonora out loud, showing how long it takes to pronounce, followed by Eli, highlighting the significant speed and ease of the shorter name. Eleonora remains silent, not responding. Osio then tells her that a shorter name is undoubtedly more efficient, and that winning a battle is far more important than the name they call each other. After some thought, Eleonora finally agrees, but insists that this name be used only during combat. She then asks him about the next battle and the identity of their opponent. Osio explains that they have an entire week to fine-tune and improve their knight's performance before the fight. However, he points out another issue. The opponents are chosen randomly. Hearing this, Eleonora asks why such a system is used. Raising his hand, Osio points to the skull emblem attached to his clothing, explaining that it serves as an identity badge, proving that its bearer is a sorcerer, and they are required to wear it at all times. He then elaborates that the skull's color and shape change based on a sorcerer's competition results. His black-colored skull indicates that he is among the lowest-ranked sorcerers, or those who were eliminated in the second qualification round. He adds that sorcerers are classified into 7 different ranks according to their abilities, with each rank having a distinct skull color and design. Eleonora deduces that, since rankings are based on previous competition results, the higher a sorcerer's rank, the stronger they are. Ozio confirms her assumption, and further explains that the random system can sometimes result in a match between a bronze-ranked 6th-tier sorcerer and a diamond-ranked 3rd-tier opponent. If luck is particularly bad, they could even face an emerald-ranked 2nd-tier sorcerer. Eleonora expresses her concern, noting that her movement is still not entirely stable, and that facing a high-ranked opponent would be a significant problem for Ozio. At that moment, Ozio picks up the envelope containing the name of their upcoming opponent. Upon opening it and seeing the name, a look of shock appears on his face. The scene shifts to a more luxurious setting, where another player is seated discussing the next round of qualification matches. Meanwhile, a girl beside him holds an envelope containing the name of his opponent. He asks her about the identity of his challenger. She informs him that the available information is insufficient, but she confirms that the opponent is a novice sorcerer participating in the competition for the first time. Upon hearing this, the player smirks confidently and declares that this preliminary round will be ridiculously easy for them. His overconfidence quickly becomes understandable as the skull he wears is revealed, marked with the color of the first rank.